If my aunt had asked me directly, I might have been able to answer her honestly without resenting her. If she had said, "I know this is your night, but being left out hurts me more than I expected," I would have understood that. If she had admitted she was afraid of becoming less central, now that I no longer needed the same kind of saving, I probably would have cried with her. But that is not what happened. What happened was that she arrived at my restaurant 40 minutes early, carrying a bakery box and wearing pearl earrings she usually saved for baptisms and funerals, then looked around the empty dining room and asked me, very casually, where I wanted her standing for the announcement. Not if I wanted her there, not whether this was still private. Where I wanted her standing, that was when something in me went still. The restaurant was dark except for the pendant lights over the bar and the amber lamps near the front windows. We had closed early for what I told my siblings would be a small family toast after service. Mateo, my business partner, was upstairs finishing invoices. In less than an hour, I was going to tell the people I loved that after 8 years of work, debt, compromise, and one nearly catastrophic winter, I had signed the papers to buy him out. The place would finally be mine. Not mine in the romantic sense. Mine in the legal, exhausting, if this fails, it fails on my credit sense. I had not told many people yet because I wanted one clean evening before the opinion started. Before pride got mixed with advice, worry, and all the little ways people turn your biggest moments into a committee meeting. I wanted one private toast with the people who had lived through the long middle. My Aunt Lena was not supposed to be there for the beginning. She was invited for dessert later, after the family announcement. The first hour was supposed to be small. My brother, my sister Mateo, and my kitchen manager Tasha, who had stayed when everybody sensible told her to leave. Then Lena and 2 family friends would come for cake once the emotional part was over. I made that choice carefully. Because if you have ever had a relative who loves you so fiercely that they start narrating your life as if they co-authored it, privacy stops feeling like distance and starts feeling like oxygen. Lena helped raise me after my mother fell apart, and my father disappeared in the more ordinary way men disappear, not with one dramatic exit, just through smaller and smaller failures, until absence becomes the most honest thing about them. When I was 11, and my mother stopped getting out of bed before noon, Lena took me to school. When I was 13 and the electric bill was late, she came by with groceries and pretended she had bought too much. When I was 16 and said I wanted to cook for a living, she was the one person who did not laugh first and worry second. She got me my first pair of real kitchen shoes and helped me fill out financial aid forms. She told me being good with my hands was still a way to build a future. I know what she has been to me. That is part of why the story took so long to become visible. When someone saves you during your most breakable years, it can feel almost immoral to notice the shape their help takes later. Lena was generous. Lena was loyal. Lena was also the kind of person who said "we" when she meant my life. We are not taking that job, are we? We do not let people talk to us that way. We built you stronger than that. At first it sounded loving. Then it sounded normal. Then, if I am being honest, it started sounding like a lock disguised as a blessing. By the time I opened the restaurant with Mateo, Lena had folded my struggle into her identity. She had loaned me money once when a vendor payment went wrong. She had painted the back office because I could not afford labor. She brought soup during our first winter when the pipes froze and I slept in a booth because I thought leaving for 6 hours would somehow cause the whole place to collapse. She had history here. Real history. That is what made the boundary so difficult. The line between you matter to this story and this story belongs to you too is thin, until the wrong person steps over it with confidence. 3 weeks before the buyout, Mateo told me he was done. Not angry, just tired. He wanted to move to North Carolina to help his brother with a bakery and stop spending every weekend fighting payroll math in a restaurant that had become more mine than his anyway. He said, "If you want it, I want to sell cleanly and leave with everybody still speaking." I laughed so hard I almost cried. Then I actually cried. Then I spent the next week in meetings with accountants, lenders, and one attorney, who kept saying exciting in the same tone doctors use when they mean concerning, but survivable. I did not tell Lena right away, because she turns uncertainty into involvement so quickly that I can feel my own thoughts disappear. If I had told her during negotiations, she would have had a cousin who knew a banker, a warning about trust, a theory about Mateo, and 3 calls a day asking what we had decided. Every one of those things would have arrived wrapped in love, which is what makes saying no so ugly. So I waited until the papers were signed. I planned one private family evening. I texted Lena myself. I want you there for dessert and the celebration, but I need the first conversation to stay very small. Please don't come before 7:30. She sent back a heart, a champagne glass emoji, and, of course, baby, whatever you need. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made me nervous. The day of the announcement, I cooked badly all morning. I oversalted one sauce, burned hazelnuts, and dropped a whole tray of small plates because my hands were moving faster than my brain. Tasha finally took the spoon out of my hand and said, "If you throw one more body part into this menu, I'm sending you outside." After service, we cleared the dining room, set 6 glasses at the center table, and brought out the good bottle Mateo had been saving. He kept pretending he was not emotional about leaving. I kept pretending I was not emotional about finally owning the place. At 6:50, the front door opened. I turned with a smile already forming because I assumed it was my brother arriving early. Instead, it was Lena. Her hair was pinned up. She had lipstick on. She was carrying a white bakery box tied with gold string. "I thought I'd help you set up," she said. I must have looked confused because she laughed lightly and added, "Don't give me that face. I know tonight is important." Then came the sentence. "Where do you want me standing when you tell them?" I have replayed that moment so many times, and what still unsettles me is how gentle her voice was. She did not sound like someone crashing an event. She sounded like someone arriving for her assigned place in a ceremony she believed partly belonged to her. I said, "Lena, I asked you to come later." She set the cake box down on the bar as if I had made a small, temporary mistake. Later for everyone else, maybe. I'm not everyone else. There it was. The thing about entitlement inside love is that it rarely introduces itself as selfishness. It introduces itself as exception. I told her again that I wanted the first conversation private. She gave me a look I had seen since childhood, the one that said I was being difficult in a way she planned to forgive once I calmed down. "Camilla," she said, "I was here when there wasn't even a first stove. I was here before this place had a sign. I was here when you were crying in the alley because the plumber charged you twice. Don't make me sound like a guest." That line hit exactly where she knew it would. Because she was right about the history. She had been there. She had earned importance. But importance and access are not the same thing. I said carefully, "You are not a guest. You are just not part of this first moment." She stared at me. Then she laughed once, but it came out brittle. "So who is?" I told her. "Mateo, Nora, Eli, and Tasha." She repeated Tasha's name, like she had misheard it. "Your employee?" There are few faster ways to expose how somebody ranks your world than the speed with which they minimize the people who held it up. I said, "She's more than that." Lena crossed her arms. "And I'm less than that?" This is the part where people expect screaming. There was none. Instead, there was the soft, suffocating kind of conflict, where every sentence sounds reasonable if you ignore what it is trying to take. She said she had sacrificed too much to be excluded from this. She said she did not understand why strangers were being honored over family. She said when someone helps carry you over the bridge, they should not be told to wait outside when you get to the other side. That metaphor might have worked on me if I had not suddenly understood what role she had assigned herself in it. Not witness, not loved one, keeper of passage. I realized then that she was not upset about missing information. She was upset about losing position. And once I saw that, older moments rearranged themselves. The time she told a boyfriend of mine, "She trusts too easily, so run things by me." The time she corrected me in front of cousins about whether I was really ready to expand the menu. The time she introduced me to one of her church friends, not as the owner, but as the girl I practically dragged into this dream, dragged. As if ambition had belonged to her first. Lena stepped closer and lowered her voice. That is how I knew she was angry. She said, "You would not have this place without me." I said, "I know." She said, "Then why are you acting like I need permission to stand in the room?" And there it was, not the cake, not the timing, permission. The right to decide who enters a moment that was mine. Something in me settled then, not because it stopped hurting, but because I finally knew what answer belonged to me. I told her, "Because it is my room." The sentence sounded colder out loud than it had in my head, but it was true. I went on before I could soften it into something she could negotiate. "I love you. You helped build the years that built me. That is not in question. But every important thing in my life cannot become public property just because you suffered with me on the way to it." I could see the words landing and failing at the same time. She was not hearing boundary. She was hearing erasure. Her eyes filled immediately. She said, "So this is what happens now? You make it, and suddenly I'm too much?" For years, I had worried that independence would look like abandonment to the people who helped me survive long enough to reach it. She knew that, whether she meant to use it or not. I almost apologized. Not because I was wrong, because I was trained in that exact moment to protect her from the shape of my adulthood. Then, Tasha came downstairs. She took one look at both of us and stopped halfway to the bar. Lena noticed her, wiped under one eye, and gave a brittle smile. Well, I wouldn't want to delay the inner circle. That line should not have worked on me anymore. A month earlier, it probably would have. But humiliation can be clarifying. Something about seeing my private boundary turned into a performance of wounded rank made the whole structure visible. I said, "Please come back at 7:30. She stared at me a long time. Then she picked the bakery box back up. At the door, she turned and said, "One day you'll understand that people don't wait forever to be shut out." Then she left. Tasha asked if I wanted the family toast canceled. I said no so quickly I surprised myself. Because for the first time all evening, I understood what was actually at stake. If I surrendered the moment to repair Lena's feelings immediately, I would be teaching my own life the same lesson it had been learning for years. That the person most hurt by your boundary becomes the rightful owner of your milestone. So we continued. My siblings arrived. Mateo brought the bottle over, I told them. I wish I could say the room glowed and music swelled and all the emotional machinery of adulthood clicked into place. It did not. I was shaky. I cried halfway through. Eli yelled so loudly I thought he might set off the car alarm outside. Nora hugged me hard enough to hurt and said, into my hair, "You did this. Not someday. Today." Mateo raised his glass and said the kindest thing he has ever said to me. This place stopped being half mine a long time ago. Tonight is just the paperwork catching up. For a few minutes, I felt clean joy. Because I had not handed the center of the moment away, Lena came back at 7:45. She was composed again, so composed it made my chest ache. She had bought a second cake from somewhere else, which was somehow both impressive and deeply on brand. She kissed my cheek, congratulated me, told everyone how proud she was. If you had walked in then, you would have thought nothing had happened. She stayed an hour and left early. 2 days later, my cousin called to say Lena was devastated and felt replaced. Replaced is such a revealing word. No one says replaced unless they believe they occupied a position. I did not argue with my cousin. I did not send long texts explaining myself. I did not reopen the case so everyone could vote on whether my adulthood had been delivered in the proper tone. I just said I love her, and she doesn't get to stand in every doorway of my life. That is where things remain. Messy, tender, unfinished. I still love Lena. I still owe part of my survival to her. I still think she confuses being essential to my history with being entitled to my future. Maybe some people are so afraid of becoming less necessary that they mistake closeness for a permanent claim. Maybe gratitude, if never allowed to mature, curdles into a debt no one can fully repay. The restaurant is mine now. Some mornings I unlock the front door before sunrise and stand in the dark for 1 extra minute before turning on the lights. Not because I am dramatic, because there is a difference between building a place and fully arriving inside it. That night was the first time I understood the cost of arrival. It was not money. It was not exhaustion. It was accepting that some people can love you deeply and still resent the exact moment your life stops revolving around the role they played in saving it. And if I learned anything useful from the whole thing, it is this. Being grateful for the hands that held you up does not require handing them the pen every time your story turns a page.
Thank you for watching. If this story pulled you in, do me one favor. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so the next one finds you the moment it drops. Remember, nothing is ever just what it seems. See you on the next one.